The diplomatic friction between India and China might have a spillover effect next week, with reports suggesting that Xi Jinping might snub the G20 Summit being held in New Delhi. Reports say that Premier Li Qiang will travel to India as China's representative. Mr. Li is reportedly expected to also attend a summit of East and Southeast Asian leaders in Jakarta next week. Neither China nor India have confirmed the reports. But if confirmed, Mr. Xi will be the second notable absence after Russia's Vladimir Putin pulled out. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov will be representing Moscow. However, US President Joe Biden will attend the G20 summit. There had been expectations that this could be a venue for him to meet his Chinese counterpart. The two global powers have been seeking to stabilize relations soured by a range of trade and geopolitical tensions. The two leaders last met on the sidelines of last year's G20 summit in Bali. Ishan Garg joins us live now. He's in New Delhi. Ishan, Mr. Modi's tried to use India's leadership of the G20 this year to bridge differences among member countries on issues like the war in Ukraine. How can he possibly achieve that, though, when the leaders of two major powers, Russia and China, they aren't even attending?
Well, India has been walking a diplomatic tightrope since it assumed the G20 presidency. One of the bigger issues that has dominated the G20 agenda this year has been the war in Ukraine, with the G7 nations, particularly the US and Russia and China, not agreeing on the specifics of how they are going to refer even to the war in Ukraine in the official communique. And that has meant that in the past two crucial meetings in the last year, the G20 foreign ministers meeting and the defense ministers meeting, the grouping could not come to a common understanding on the communique as well. And this is one of the bigger issues for India, for India's G20 presidency. For the optics and for the perception, many analysts say that this is not going to look good for the G20 grouping as a whole, because concerns are now being raised that the group is not working as a cohesive unit. But in terms of the other specific items on the agenda, analysts are saying that a lot of work has already been done through the past 1 year in terms of climate financing, in terms of maintaining resilient supply chains, in terms of getting the global south countries more equitable access to financing, and all of that will culminate at the G20 summit, even if the heads of state of Russia and China are not present. So analysts are also saying that even if these two countries are not present at the summit itself, a lot of the work that's happened in the G20 will still remain valid. But for the sake of perception and optics, it might look like the G20 grouping is not working as a cohesive unit.
Ishan, there had been hope of a reset of China-India relations after Mr. Xi and Mr. Modi met at the BRICS summit in South Africa. How much of a setback to those efforts would there be if Mr. Xi didn't attend the G20 summit this time?
Well, Mr. Modi and Mr. Xi Jinping, when they met in Johannesburg, there was huge expectation that the border issue could be substantially resolved to some degree. But now those hopes are looking dashed, at least to a certain extent. And many analysts are saying that this is why there is a trust deficit between India and China, because the two countries don't seem to always know what the other is going to do. From India's perspective, after the meeting, when China came out with a new map claiming the territories of Arunachal Pradesh and Aksai Chin in the northern Ladakh region, that itself rose tensions once again. And now, if Mr. Xi does not attend the G20 summit in New Delhi, this relationship is going to take a further hit. Now, relations between India and China have been on the low. They have been frozen since clashes broke out between the two countries a few years ago. But this, analysts say, was a chance for the two leaders to mend that relationship. And if Mr. Xi does not attend the summit, and naturally there are no bilaterals between Modi and Xi during the summit, this relationship may not improve to the levels that many had expected, at least in India.
Ishan, thank you for that. Ishan Garg there in New Delhi.